Welcome to Hardly, where books turn into 3 stories, refreshing your knowledge in minutes. Today, we study together Marc-William Palen's book, Pax Economica: Left-Wing Visions of a Free Trade World, in which we probe into the intertwining of economic cosmopolitanism and anti-imperialism in shaping a global order founded on free trade, peace, and social justice. Marc-William Palen is a historian at the University of Exeter in Britain. Don't go away. Hardly the editor will be right back with the story. Today, we explore 3 compelling stories that illustrate the efforts of left-wing visionaries to reshape the world through free trade, anti-imperialism, and social justice. First, we delve into the 19th century Manchester radicals who championed a free trade movement amidst Imperial Britain. Then, we examine the early 20th century American feminists who connected their struggle for women's rights with a broader campaign against imperialist trade policies. Finally, we move to post-World War II. Japan, where a Christian pacifist movement advocated for a global economic order rooted in fraternity and cooperation. These stories collectively demonstrate the enduring belief that economic interdependence could foster a more peaceful and just world. 1. The Radical Free Traders of Manchester. In the mid-19th century, a group of radicals in Manchester, England, began to advocate for a revolutionary economic principle, universal free trade. For them, free trade was more than just an economic policy. It was a moral imperative to dismantle imperial hierarchies and promote global peace. Richard Cobden and John Bright, key figures of this movement, argued passionately that free trade would lead to mutual prosperity and reduce the likelihood of war. We believe that the moral effect of free trade will be to draw nations more closely together in bonds of peace and amity, they declared. Despite facing opposition from the British aristocracy and industrial elite, who saw the removal of tariffs as a threat to their interests, the Manchester radicals persisted. They held public meetings, wrote pamphlets, and lobbied Parliament, advocating for the repeal of the Corn Laws, which kept grain prices high to benefit the landed gentry. The repeal campaign culminated in a dramatic showdown in Parliament, where Cobden delivered a powerful speech that emphasized both economic justice and human rights. The vote was close, but the Corn Laws were repealed in 1846, marking a significant victory for the free trade movement. However, the radicals understood that this was just the beginning. Their vision of a global free trade world was still far from realization. This triumph in Manchester was a crucial first step, but it was only the start of a longer struggle. Looking across the Atlantic, the free traders saw new challenges and opportunities for their ideas to flourish. 2. The feminists' free trade fight in America. In the early 20th century in the United States, feminist activists began linking their fight for women's rights with a broader campaign against imperialist trade practices. These women, many of them suffragettes, believed that economic exploitation and gender oppression were deeply connected. Florence Kelley, a prominent feminist and social reformer, argued that the fight for women's rights was intertwined with the fight for global economic justice. At a rally in New York, she declared, "When we say free trade, we mean freedom from all forms of tyranny, economic, political, and gendered." The Women's Free Trade League, founded by Kelley, became a powerful force. They organized demonstrations, circulated petitions, and wrote extensively in the press. Their most notable campaign was against tariffs on imported goods from Asia, which they argued perpetuated imperialist exploitation and limited economic opportunities for women. They highlighted the garment industry, where poor working conditions and low wages were directly tied to restrictive trade policies. Their campaign gained traction, and they secured a hearing before Congress, where Kelly's testimony was a turning point. How can we speak of freedom when half the world's population is enslaved by unfair economic practices? Though they did not succeed in repealing all tariffs, they achieved several victories, including reducing tariffs on textiles and raising public awareness about the links between free trade, gender equality, and anti-imperialism. This campaign set the stage for future alliances between feminist and anti-imperialist movements, showing how economic and social justice were interconnected. As these American feminists advanced their cause halfway across the world, another group was beginning to see how economic ideas could shape a more peaceful and just society. 3. The pacifist Christians of post-war Japan. After World War II, a group of Christian pacifists in Japan emerged with a vision for a new economic order based on peace and cooperation. Led by Toyohiko Kagawa, a Christian reformer and activist, they believed that peace could only be achieved through economic justice and free trade. Kagawa, who had studied socialist economics and Christian social reform in the United States, witnessed the devastation of war and imperial ambitions. "We cannot have peace until we have economic justice," he preached. In post-war Japan, Kagawa and his followers organized community cooperatives and trade associations that promoted fairness, transparency, and mutual benefit. One of their most ambitious projects was the International Peace Market in Tokyo, a space where goods from all over the world could be traded freely and fairly. The market became a symbol of their commitment to a world without economic exploitation. Despite skepticism from Japan's business community and attempts to undermine the market, Kagawa's commitment and growing support from peace activists helped the market thrive. By the early 1950s, it had become a bustling hub of economic activity, attracting traders and visitors worldwide. "We are proving," Kagawa wrote to his followers, "that another world is possible, a world where trade is not a tool of exploitation, but a means of building peace." Inspired by the peace market's success, similar initiatives sprang up across Asia, planting the seeds for a global movement advocating economic justice and peace. Each of these stories, from the radicals in Manchester to the feminists in America to the pacifists in Japan, illustrates a shared belief that economic cooperation and interdependence can lay the foundation for a just and peaceful world. By learning from these lessons, we can envision a future where economic policies are crafted not for a few, but for the peace and prosperity of all. As the editor of Hardly, through studying these stories, we can imagine a future where economic justice and global cooperation drive our actions. Reflecting on the intertwined relationship between economic cosmopolitanism and anti-imperialism, we see how these ideas have shaped movements and policies across different eras and regions. The belief that free trade could foster peace, dismantle imperialistic structures, and promote social justice has driven numerous activists and reformers to challenge the status quo. One particularly striking story from the book is the campaign of the International Peace Congress in Brussels in the early 1900s. At this gathering, a diverse group of left-wing activists, socialists, and pacifists came together to advocate for a global free trade agreement that would reduce tariffs and eliminate trade barriers. They argued that economic interdependence would not only promote prosperity, but also prevent wars by making countries economically reliant on one another. Their plea, "Trade, not war," echoed through the halls and captured the imagination of many, including the young delegates who would later become leaders in their respective countries. Although their proposal did not immediately result in a global treaty, it planted the seeds for future economic cooperation and set a precedent for international dialogue. The journey through these narratives highlights the enduring power of economic ideas to shape global relations. As the editor of Hardly, by understanding these historical struggles for economic justice and peace, we can better navigate today's challenges and envision a future where global cooperation prevails over conflict.